Thank you for joining us today for this tax information workshop. I would especially like to thank the representatives from the IRS and the SBA for making themselves available to assist my constituents with their tax questions. I know how stressful tax time can be, and sometimes help filing taxes can be expensive or too difficult for folks to access. These wonderful representatives from the IRS and SBA will go over tax season filing tips, obtaining tax records, how the CARES Act legislation affects taxable incomes, and other topics. There will also be a Q&A portion where you will be able to ask questions. So I hope that today you are able to get the help you need. I'm going to turn things over to my wonderful staff, Ms. Jasmine Alvarez, to get us started. Again, thank you for joining us today, and please be sure to reach out to my office if you need any further assistance with IRS or SBA questions. Have a great workshop.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Good evening, everyone. My name is Jasmine. Thank you all for joining us tonight. I am the Director of Constituent Services for Congresswoman Robin Kelly, and I'm happy to be joined today by staff from Senator Dick Durbin's office, as well as some wonderful representatives from the IRS and the SBA, Small Business Administration. Special shout out to Andrew and Susan and Robert for joining us tonight. In the interest of time tonight, we won't be going over any individual cases. However, we're hopeful that this presentation will address any issues that you might have. And there will be some time at the end for some a question and answer session. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, you may feel free to type it into the Q&A section at the bottom of the screen. And with that, I'll go ahead and start my screen sharing and start the presentation from the IRS.
Thank you, Jasmine, and thank you everyone for being here tonight. I really appreciate the opportunity to share IRS information with you all. So on the next slide, you'll see a list of the topics I plan to cover this evening. I'll start by discussing how you can get help with filing taxes if you haven't filed yet. I'll go over some tax filing tips, some scenarios for after you file, and then I will conclude with information on how to access your tax records. And then I'll turn it over to my colleague, Andrew Van Single, to discuss the Taxpayer Advocate service. So on the next slide, you may be wondering how you can get help filing your tax return if you haven't already filed. So if you have internet access and your income is below $73,000, you can use IRS Free File. If you the IRS Free File program is a public-private partnership between the IRS and many tax preparation and tax software industry leaders who provide their brand name products for free. Or maybe you need personal assistance helping you to file your tax return. There's also options available for that. If your income's under $58,000, you can use our volunteer income tax assistance locator options to find free tax return assistance. Or if your income's above the amounts I just mentioned, or maybe you have a more complex return or a business return, you can actually use our Choosing a Tax Professional tool to help you find the right tax return preparer to help you. And on the next slide, the tax filing due date for most 2021 individual federal income tax returns is April the 18th. And when you get ready to file, we ask that you make sure that you file a complete and accurate tax return. We also highly recommend that you file electronically to avoid refund delays. Paper returns are taking a significant amount of time to process right now. And not only is electronic filing the safest and most accurate way to file a tax return, electronically filed tax returns actually have fewer errors, which means fewer delays. We also want to encourage you to get your tax refund electronically by requesting direct deposit. Filing electronically and selecting direct deposit remains the fastest and safest way to file an accurate tax return and receive your refund. And when you're entering that direct deposit information, We do recommend that you triple check those numbers, check those account numbers and the routing numbers to make sure you have entered that information correctly, because if you don't, then your refund may end up in someone else's bank account. And speaking of refunds, most refunds are sent in less than 21 days, although some tax returns will take longer to process for many reasons, including if your tax return has errors, or if your tax return is incomplete, or that could be because you didn't include all of your income, or maybe you didn't correctly reconcile your stimulus payment or your advanced child tax credit payments. Sometimes they take longer because you've been affected by identity theft or fraud. And sometimes tax returns just take additional time in general because the IRS needs to perform an additional review. It's important to note that the IRS will contact you by mail if we need additional information to process your tax return. And the Where's My Refund tool on irs.gov remains the best source for information on the status of your refund. That tool is updated once a day, and that update usually occurs overnight. On the next slide. And of course, the opposite of getting a refund is when you owe taxes. Now, you should file your tax return by April 18th, even if you cannot full pay the amount that you owe. If you need more time to file your tax return, you can submit a form 4868. That 4868 is a request for an extension, and it will give you until October 17th to file your tax return. However, I need to mention that an extension of time to file is not an extension of time to pay. All payments are still due on April 18th, and anything not paid by that date will accrue interest and penalties. So if you believe you may have trouble paying your tax bill by the April 18th due date, I want to suggest that you do not panic. You file your tax return even if you're unable to pay it. However, you should try to pay as much as you can by the 18th in order to minimize the amount of penalties and interest that will accrue after the due date. Filing a tax return on time is especially important because the late filing penalty and the late payment penalty on unpaid taxes can add up quickly. But if you can't afford to pay it, there are options available to you. You can request a short-term extension to pay. You can request an extended payment plan for a longer period of time. The IRS has something called an offer in compromise, where you can settle the taxes that you owe for less than full amount if you qualify. Or if you cannot afford to pay anything at all right now, you can request that the IRS temporarily delay the collection process until your financial situation improves. You can find more information about all of your payment options on the IRS website by going to irs.gov/payments. And the next slide. Now I want to talk about IRS account information, how to get access to your tax records. So first, you can use an IRS online account to securely access the latest tax information available about your federal tax account and see information from your most recently filed tax return on irs.gov. If you haven't already set up an online account, you can create an account to view your tax information online. The IRS has a publication 5533 that provides more information about how to set up your online account. If you have an online account, you can view the amount of your economic impact payments. Maybe you didn't get that letter 6475 that tells you how much your stimulus payment was, and you need to know that dollar amount in order to file your tax return. Or you can see the amount of your advanced child tax credit payments received in 2021. If maybe you didn't get that letter 6419 that tells you how much those payments were, and you need the dollar amount to file your tax return and reconcile that with the 2021 child tax credit. Other information you can find online is your most recent tax return, additional records such as your transcripts. If you have a payment plan, you can view the details of your payment plan. You can actually see 5 years of payment history and any pending or scheduled payments you may have. But some people either can't set up an online account for some reason, or they don't want to set up an online account. there's still options to get your tax records. You can order your transcripts over the phone by calling an automated system. You put in a few key details and the system will automatically mail your transcripts to you. You can, on that same web page listed, you can click a button and say, mail them to me at my address of record. Put in a few key pieces of information and the system will automatically mail them to you. Or on that page, you'll also find a form 4506T. That's a form you can fill out by hand and mail to the IRS or fax to the IRS. All of these options get your transcripts to you within 7 to 10 work days. There's more information on the webpage listed, but I do want to note, accessing your online account or requesting your transcripts can answer many of the questions that you may otherwise need to call the IRS for. Our IRS assisters, when you call them, have to pull up your tax account to see what's going on to answer your questions. So by obtaining your transcripts or requesting your transcripts, you'll be able to see what they're seeing and maybe help you avoid that phone call. All right, now I want to turn it over to my colleague, Andrew Van Singel. He's the local taxpayer advocate in Chicago, and Andrew's going to talk about the Taxpayer Advocate Service. Andrew?
Thank you, Susie. So just a couple of quick things to talk about Taxpayer Advocate and how we work cases in our office. So as the slide here indicates, TAS is an independent agency operated through the IRS. We're here to help protect your rights as a taxpayer and really get involved when the system breaks down or doesn't work as intended. You can read more about our information about what we do on our website, which is listed on the slide in front of you, or you can call, if you need a case open, you can call our centralized intake line and someone can help you with your tax matter. Next slide. One of the unique features of Taxpayer Advocate is that when you come to Taxpayer Advocate, you're going to get a case advocate that's going to work with you from start to finish. So in the past, you may have had to call the IRS 5 different times and you heard from 5 different people. That's really not the experience you're going to get at Taxpayer Advocate. You're going to have one person work on your case from start to finish. They'll help educate you as to what caused the issue. And that's really kind of a unique feature that we have within Taxpayer Advocate. I will say, though, that a lot of the issues that we work on in Taxpayer Advocate are issues where the taxpayer filed an incorrect tax return. We really do work on a whole wide range of cases, not just individual. We work with individual taxpayers, corporations, families, single parents, students. Again, just a wide variety. But a lot of the casework that we do is for people who had filed tax returns and there's some sort of issue with the return, and that's causing delayed processing. So Susie kind of talked about really the importance of getting it right the first time. With the backlog and all the delays that the IRS has faced over the last couple of years, problems that normally took a couple of weeks or a couple of months to get resolved are now going on, 6 to 12 months to get resolved. So it really is imperative that, if you work somewhere only for a couple of weeks, you got to wait for that W-2 and make sure you put it on the tax return. Taxes are increasingly complicated. If you're getting health coverage through the Affordable Care Act, you're going to get a 1095A. If you're buying and selling stocks and bonds, maybe through an account like Robinhood, you're going to get a statement for that, and that has to show up on your tax return. If you're buying and selling crypto, that's something that needs to be reported on the tax return. Kind of because of the downturn in the economy back in 2020, a lot of people either got laid off or just left work and kind of have gone and started their own small businesses. So those are, again, all things that need to really be reported on a tax return. And when you don't do that, that's really when you get issues on the tax return. Next slide. When you go to Taxpayer Advocate, I always say we're not the first phone call you'll make, but hopefully the last one. To get a case into TAS, generally it's going to require an immediate economic hardship. So if something doesn't happen quickly, you're going to have irreparable harm, or you're going to have a significant expense and whatever the delay is in getting the issue resolved, or there's a systemic delay. And that means that it has gone on, or you've been waiting for more than the prescribed periods that it takes to get the issue resolved. Those are generally when we can get involved on those types of cases. Taxpayer Advocate also administers the low-income taxpayer clinic program. And so the clinics, there's about, I think, 130 clinics across the country. I think there's 4 or 5 in the Chicago area. And they help people who are low to moderate income with tax controversy matters. So those are matters that essentially is everything except for filing a tax return. So they can help you with, if you get a letter from the IRS or you get an exam, audit, if you have to go to tax court for your cases and appeals, they can really help you with any type of tax matter. Even though it is low to moderate income, they do have some discretion to go over their income guidelines. So don't let that be a barrier to reaching out to them. And there's no income eligibility requirements for them to give you advice. So if you're just outside of their acceptance criteria, they can still provide you with advice on your matter. TAS also administers the Taxpayer Advocacy Panel, and this is a member of, I think, 75 members across the country. And they do outreach and talk to taxpayers and try to make improvements within the IRS. Next slide. Taxpayer Advocate is very active on social media. We have accounts on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, and they put out a lot of good content. The National Taxpayer Advocate, that's my boss, she puts out some good information via her blog, usually twice a month. And it's really good information to have. You can get more information on our website. Taxpayer Advocate and the IRS in general is also doing a lot of hiring. We were waiting to get a full year budget, which was just signed, I think, last week or 2 weeks ago. And so we're going to have a lot more job postings across the agency. So be sure to check out USA Jobs if you're looking for a career in government service. All of our hiring is done through USA Jobs. And I think that rounds us out. I think we can go back to Bo to talk about SBA.
Great. Thank you, Andrew and Susie. We will now turn it over to Robert.
Hey, thank you, Jasmine, and hi, everybody. Great to be on a panel with Andrew and Susan. I finally see Andrew for the first time in a video conference, so that's kind of nice. As Jasmine mentioned, my name is Bo Steiner. I'm the district director from the Small Business Administration here in Illinois. And given that it is tax season and many small business owners took advantage of programs that were administered by the SBA through the CARES Act and other legislation that afforded businesses with either loans, forgiven loans, grants, or even payments, we did want to talk a little bit about the tax implications of those programs. Now, I do want to caveat this with, I am not a tax advisor. So, I'm going to cover these things broadly. For your unique situation, if you have one, you would definitely want to engage with somebody, either a tax advisor, accountant, or I'm sure many of the systems that are available through many of the online providers who support, filing your tax returns have implemented kind of the wizard to help with these kinds of things. But what I really want to do, and only take a few minutes, is just talk through the various programs and discuss how they will impact you and your tax situation. So first, I'll touch on the Paycheck Protection Program, which was a loan program, but the loan could be forgiven as long as the proceeds were used in an appropriate way. Now, normally a forgiven loan is considered the same as income. So, but the legislation through Congress signed by the president basically said, look, any amount of forgiveness will not be considered taxable income per the rules of this program. So that's number one. Forgiven loan through the PPP program should not be a taxable event for you as an organization. Now, if you have a PPP loan and you have not yet filed forgiveness and you intend to, really encourage you to do so that you can get that loan off the books. It can affect you as you seek other capital down the road. So just encouragement there. Second program I'm going to touch on is the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program. So loans generally are not taxable events. So when you receive a loan, you're going to repay it. That's not something that would impact your taxes, but I just want to make sure that's clear because there could be some confusion along the way. The Economic Injury Disaster Loan, EIDL for shorthand, is not a forgiven. It's not a program where you can seek forgiveness for that loan. But again, it's long-term low interest and there is no taxable event in that case. Turning to the Restaurant Revitalization Fund program, that was more or less very similar to a grant program where funds were distributed directly to business entities in the food, beverage, people convening space. Again, Congress made sure to in the legislation to categorize those funds as non-taxable for purposes of your federal tax returns, as was the Shuttered Venue Operators Grant, again, another grant program that made those funds available. So in both of those cases, both those programs, no taxable impact there. And then finally, there were in 2020, the Targeted Advance, Economic Injury Disaster Loan Advance, and the Supplemental Targeted Advance. These were funds that went to businesses in low-income communities, met certain other criteria related to their business. Again, Congress made sure that those funds would not be taxable per the legislation that was signed into law. So I think the big picture here is most of the programs that SBA provided through the CARES Act and other legislation should not impact have an adverse tax impact on your tax returns. As you go ahead and file, again, you want to touch base with your tax professional to make sure that's the case, but that's what Congress legislated. Also note that as a small business owner, when you're looking at your profit and loss statements, your account may show those funds as income, but they'll be separated out typically so that they aren't included in your general revenue that you drive through the day-to-day operations of your business. So hopefully that's helpful on that front. And then since we are, talking about IRS and SBA, I do just want to put a plug in, for those of you that are still in the process of working through the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program, we do have a number of people that have applied and are waiting for decisions. One of the key elements that we need is a IRS Form 4506T, which allows SBA to pull your tax transcript from the IRS. So if you are asked to provide that as part of the process, I just ask that you really look at the instructions. There's some very detailed guidelines that we need in order to have those 4506Ts accepted by the IRS so that we can get your transcripts, which we need in order to approve and disperse the loan. So again, any questions that come up either now we can try and answer, or in the future, you can always reach out to SBA at the Illinois district here at illinois.do@sba.gov. So, we're here to help and we can take a look, if you're having trouble with 4506T or you have other questions about these programs, happy to answer any of those questions. That's the best way to reach us.
Awesome. Thank you, Bo. Once again, thank you to Susie, Andrew, and Bo for your awesome presentations. We will now move into the Q&A section of our workshop. So if any of our participants have a question, you can type it into the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. Otherwise, you can ask your question out loud by using the raise hand feature.
Okay, so it seems as Joyetta, hope I'm saying that right, has a question. Joyetta, I'm going to go ahead and allow you on the screen. Joyetta, if you can please unmute yourself and ask the question. Please.
Okay, now you can hear me.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm wondering because I had been doing my taxes myself, but I noticed there's a form for seniors. When I say seniors, I mean those of us over 75.
Joyetta, I think you're referring to the Form 1040 SR. And that is a form that's available for seniors to use to file. It's very similar to the regular Form 1040. However, it does list on the form itself your standard deduction amount for being over 65, or if you're married and both you and your spouse are over 65, those numbers are listed directly on the form rather than having to dig through the 134-page instruction booklet to find those numbers. So the 1040 SR is specifically out there for seniors 65 and older. Yes.
Okay. The other thing I have a problem with, I notice all the forms now are online.
Yes,
They used to have them at the library, or I would go over to Orland and pick them up in the office over there. But there doesn't seem to be a way to get them for those of us who maybe not have a computer, or we have to borrow somebody else's, and they say, okay, enough of this borrowing.
Yes, the IRS can mail you forms. There's a 800 number you can call. It's very easy to remember. It's 1-800 tax form, or 1-800-829-3676. And I'll type that in the chat too for you. Okay.
Thank you. I have it. Thank you.
Yes,
Thank
ma'am.
you very much.
You're
One of
very
the-
welcome.
Would add to that as well. Filing, I know a lot of people just prefer to file a paper return, and I would encourage you or anyone to file electronically. And I know if you have access to a computer might be an issue. There's also VITA programs across the state. VITA is Volunteer Income Tax Assistance. And Susie, I think you had that in one of your slides. I don't know the lookup to, there's an online lookup tool, but there's also a phone number you can call to find more information about that. TCE, tax counseling for the elderly, is done through AARP, and they have sites that focus on preparing returns for senior citizens. Again, in my remarks, I talked about issues with the IRS. A lot of times are because of I say self-inflicted wounds. Those are returns that are prepared incorrectly. And we notice a lot of paper filed returns, because you're kind of manually entering that information, have a higher likelihood of having issues down the road because of, maybe transposing a number, doing the math wrong, or whatever it is. The software does make it very easy. I know that's not accessible to anyone, but to the extent it is, I would really encourage you to file electronically.
Yes, I will go to the library, but I'm kind of old school when I think about security and privacy. Just old school. If you're over 70, 75, you're a little bit more apprehensive about certain things. We just haven't got with technology, but we're trying.
I understand.
Thank you for your help, and the information is most helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Joyetta. So now we have a question from CB Lewis. CB, if you can go ahead and unmute yourself and ask away.
Yes, good evening. I'm going to frame the question as to the IRS and representative. I timely filed my tax return as well as my mom's tax return for 2020 and have been waiting ever since. And in the process, my mom has since passed away. And so I then filed the necessary forms to act on her behalf to let them know. I called IRS immediately. That was last year, and I'm still waiting. I never get anybody on the phone that could give me information. It's like pieces. Oh, your mother's deceased. You have to send this in. I send that in. I've sent everything in to say I'm the next of kin. I'm the person that is in the power of attorney position. So I'm just at my wit's end. I was gonna file a congressional with a Representative Kelly's office, but then this invite came. And so I thought this would be a perfect opportunity to just get some direction. She had a large refund due, and unfortunately she passed away in July of 2021. So
Well, My condolences about your mother. I would say you're on the right track. I would follow up with the Congresswoman's office, and that case will get routed over to us into the Chicago office, and we'll oversee that. We'll probably, it sounds like you may have two separate cases, one for your own individual issue and then one for your deceased mother.
No. It's just for my mom. My
just-
taxes were, I own and I paid. That's not the issue. It was her taxes that I filed. We both filed at the same time.
Mhm.
And my mom was 89. So, you know, I was her power of attorney and I filed her taxes properly as I had it every year. But because it was taking so long, and I called to report that she passed, and then I sent in all the paperwork as the person that acted as her proxy in her passing and all of that. Nothing. And I never get anybody on the phone. So it's just kind of frustrating, you know, just want some closure. Yeah.
Absolutely. So the head of my agency, Erin Collins, she's the National Taxpayer Advocate, and every year in January and February, she issues what's called an annual report to Congress, and she highlights a lot of the struggles that the IRS has had, and recognizes some of the victories that they've had as well. And they've been under unsurmountable just odds, and success was never really a likelihood. And so at the beginning of the year, they had 6 million individual returns that were in their backlog, and they've been just desperately trying to get caught up on that. And so we had, there was a period in time in which we couldn't take those cases because there really wasn't much that we could do. If the IRS, if it was somewhere between your mailbox and in the hands of an IRS employee, there really wasn't much we could do, because if the case comes to Taxpayer Advocate, we say, hey, process this return. The IRS doesn't have anything. And that's been the biggest challenge, because once the return gets mailed to the IRS, it goes through a long process to get, before it even gets scanned in, and a record is created in which we can, you know, go and pull the digital copy of that. And that's been a big source of frustration. A lot of taxpayers have been sending in a second return, and that's causing processing issues because they may process that second return as a duplicate return, or it may put a freeze on the refund. And so again, it kind of creates more issues down the road. The commissioner has resourced people from all different areas within the IRS. If they have any technical ability or have in the past processed returns, they pulled them from all of those functions, which is good because now that's getting those people to help with that backlog. But that's furthering the kind of the personnel crisis that we have, is that they're doing important work as well. And so now those workflows are taking longer as well. So I would say to anyone hearing this, you know, by mid-March, which, you know, it's mid-March right now, if you filed a return on time last year and it hasn't been processed, you should really contact Taxpayer Advocate or Congresswoman Kelly's office, because it's, you know, it's really almost going on a year. And, you know, that's something that we would certainly want to look at. And also too, I would say a lot of times, you know, people hear that Taxpayer Advocate can help, and a lot of times we can. But it's really important to try to get it resolved on your own, especially if it's for a case like an identity verification. Sometimes those issues can be resolved over the phone. And I know it's so difficult to get a hold of anyone on the phone. So a lot of times people give up those cases, because the way we work them, it might take several weeks or several months. And if you can just get through to somebody on the phone, it's possible that you could get that resolved in that one phone call, or you could make an appointment to go to a taxpayer assistance center. And they could verify your identity for you, as opposed to usually going to Taxpayer Advocate's going to be the quickest route, but sometimes there are other options that could be a little bit quicker.
Okay, so I appreciate all the information, and I got them some options, and hopefully I'll get some resolution to that. So thank you. This was very beneficial to me, and I'll get on it first thing. So I guess, Jasmine, you'll be hearing from me or somebody from her office. I'll be in contact.
Absolutely. And TAS is wonderful to work with. They're always so helpful to our office. So
Did they post a number or anything? I'm sorry for cutting you off. Did they post a number or something where you know who to contact? Is that in the chat information?
it was in the presentation. I can also copy it into the chat. And additionally, we can assist with the case. So I did share our office's number, as well as a link to our digital privacy release form. But I'll go ahead and share the task number right now once I find it in the presentation.
Okay,
I've got it, Jasmine. I'll put it in the chat.
okay,
Perfect. Thank you, Susie.
okay. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you for your question. We'll give a couple more seconds. Again, if you do have a question at the bottom of your screen, you will see a Q&A box where you can type it in, or you can click the raise hand feature. And I'll go ahead and call on you. So we'll give you a few more seconds to see if anyone else has questions. So it doesn't appear we have any more questions. I want to thank Susan, Robert, and Andrew for joining us. Jasmine, thank you for hosting. You can go ahead and take it away.
Yeah, thank you, Luis. Once again, thank you to our awesome panelists who have been so helpful today, like always. Thank you all to our constituents for participating. Like I said, if you all have any questions that you'd like to follow up on with our office or with any of the representatives, you can reach us at our office number that I shared in the chat. You know, hopefully you don't encounter any issues this tax season. So thank you all for joining us today.